Representative Holt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here in person. I've never been here in person before. We've always done it by Zoom, so it's great to be here.
I know. I meant to look it up and see what our last podcast was, because last year we did at least 4.
Yeah, we did quite a few last year. We hadn't
5.
gotten to it this year, but
it's been a busy year for you.
It has been. It absolutely has been.
So what's going on at the Capitol?
Well, this coming week, it may not be a secret to a lot of folks, but I have filed a piece of legislation that would remove gender identity as a protected class from the Iowa Civil Rights Code, because I think we have to do it. The time is now, and it isn't just me that believes that. I think the majority of the House Republican caucus believes that also, and so we have filed that legislation.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I did a breakdown of it. I read it several times, and I'm impressed with how well... I know this has been in the works for a long time, and you've taken a lot of our feedback and everybody's feedback on it, but I was surprised at how comprehensive it was with dealing with the situation we're in.
Yeah, we worked with a lot of legal groups that are experts in this area. We define man and woman in a way that I think is ironclad. We took birth certificates and made sure they could not be used. Even if someone changes their gender, their biology at birth still has to be on that birth certificate. And our definitions of male and female, I think, are just ironclad, and we have removed gender identity as a protected class from the Civil Rights Code, but transgender individuals will continue to have the same rights as you and I do sitting here, Oliver. They're protected by the United States Constitution. They're protected by the Bill of Rights. They're protected by the Iowa Constitution. I had a conversation a few years ago with some Supreme Court justices off the record, and I said, how are protected classes even legal? Because we're all supposed to have equal protection under the law. So I've never really understood protected classes, because in effect they elevate these groups' rights above others. And the justices basically told me they agree with my legal conclusion, but the fact is the courts over the years have determined that to right some egregious wrongs from the past, that they accepted protected classes. Most of them are based on immutable characteristics such as your race and those sorts of things. But that's why they're there. And in this case, when it comes to gender identity, it is elevating this group's rights above others, and it is violating the rights of a number of other citizens, particularly, I think, women in our country.
Oh, yeah, definitely. How did it get into the Civil Rights Code, and when did that happen?
Yeah, that happened in 2007. 2007, the Democrats had the trifecta. They had the governor's office, they had the House, and they had the Senate, and that's when it went in.
What was in my breakdown, I say, and I probably believe they didn't really probably understand the ramifications over the last 15 years of what that would mean and what that would... The challenge is, like you said, with a immutable characteristic, this is something that doesn't require a diagnosis. Right. It doesn't require any sort of actual physical changes. Right. All it is something in someone's head. And really, I believe it's a mind virus. Right. I mean, it's spread like wildfire. Right. With all the the tentacles that have gotten into every aspect of our lives.
It certainly seems to be a social contagion, and I got to tell you, Oliver, for probably 5 years as Judiciary Chair, I have resisted this because I wanted to exhaust every other option. So the first thing we tried to do was sort of cut the tentacles off the octopus. So we said, we're going to protect women's sports. We passed legislation to protect women's sports. Then we said we have to protect locker rooms and changing facilities and bathrooms. I ran that legislation to do that. Then we said, we have to make sure that there are no gender reassignment procedures on our young people. We did that. So we've protected bathrooms, changing facilities. We protected our minors from getting these procedures. We protected women's sports. Here's the reality that we need to talk about. 27 states do not have any kind of protections like this at all. Depending on how you read the language in 2 other states, it could be as high as 29. But a minimum of 27 states do not have any protections for gender identity in their codes, and neither does the federal government. And let's remember that under Joe Biden, that was the most transgender-friendly administration in the history of the country, and they did not see fit to put gender identity as a protected class in the federal Civil Rights Code because it's not necessary, because of all the problems it creates. So here's the reality that we're facing right now. Iowa citizens are currently having to pay for gender reassignment, gender surgeries, and hormone therapy, and all this stuff for Medicaid patients and for prisoners and for incarcerated individuals, because gender identity is a protected class in code. So when we found out that was happening around 2017, 2018, we passed legislation that said Iowans will not pay for that. They sued, the activist group sued immediately, and guess what happened? The Iowa Supreme Court struck down our law and said, because gender identity is a protected class in Iowa code, Iowans, citizens of Iowa, have to pay for these surgeries and procedures for Medicaid patients, for incarcerated individuals. And that was Good versus the Iowa Department of Human Services in 2019. They ruled that taxpayers must fund these procedures because gender identity is in the Civil Rights Code. And they also expressly found the Department of Health and Human Services, along with almost every other government agency, is a public accommodation under our civil rights statute. So when you think about the fact that 27 other states do not have these protections in code.
How many of those states are Republican?
Well, the fact of the matter is that almost all of them are red states.
Right.
And then, but the federal government doesn't have them either. So Iowa is the only state in this country that has gender identity as a protected class, but also has moved to protect women's sports and moved to protect their bathrooms and changing facilities. So this is a legal conundrum that we do not believe can stand. We believe that as soon as someone files suit against our laws protecting women's sports and protecting their changing facilities and bathrooms, keeping biological males out of sports, all those things, we believe as soon as we're sued, we're very likely to lose those lawsuits because we've already lost one. So
right.
Gender identity being a protected class in Iowa code is the reason we fear that all of the things that we have done to try to bring sanity to the state could be struck down. And let me tell you my theory on why they haven't sued yet. I've been thinking about this, and this is one of the reasons I ultimately said we have to file this bill. Right now, Republicans have the trifecta in Iowa. So if they were to sue on any of these things, it would spur Republicans into action, and probably the first step we would have taken would have been to begin to move to remove gender identity as a protected class from code, because we would have realized when they file suit, okay, this can't stand. So I think the reason they haven't filed suit yet, frankly, Oliver, is I think they're waiting for a situation in which Republicans no longer have the trifecta.
Right.
God forbid if in 2 years a Democrat were to become governor, or we were to lose the House or the Senate majority, that's when they're going to sue, because then they've got everything to gain and nothing to lose. If they were to lose the court, the lawsuit, it's the status quo. They're in the same situation they're in now. But if they win the lawsuit, Republicans are not going to be in any position whatsoever to be able to remove gender identity as protected class from code and restore these protections, because we're not going to have the trifecta. I think that is absolutely why they're waiting strategically to file the lawsuit, and why we have to move to do this, because if we don't, all the protections we've enacted are going to fall, and Iowans are going to continue to pay for these procedures. And I'll just tell you right now, since 2015, Iowans have paid $1,950,613 so far from 2015 to 2022 for these procedures.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Is that part of the reason why you think the medical establishment is behind some of this, is that they're making money from it?
You know, the woke mind virus has gotten to a lot of people. So you've got the whole medical community that claims this stuff is necessary. It's not necessary. There are a number of doctors out there who have published papers that say actually there always seems to be an underlying mental illness connected with somebody that suffers from gender dysphoria. And we also know that in almost every case, young people that suffer from gender dysphoria will return to identifying with their biological sex once they go through puberty.
Right.
And so, you know, you've got a lot of factors there. I think part of it, the motivation for some people might be money. I don't think there's probably any doubt about that. What the motivation is from other people, why in the world would feminists, why in the world would Democrats on the left be for erasing women, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're erasing women in their own sports. They're erasing women in their bathrooms and changing facilities, and suddenly the feelings and concerns and security and fairness for women don't matter anymore to the left. These are the individuals that champion women's rights, that fought for Title IX and all of these things. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, but that's what they're doing.
And what happened to Title IX federally? I know that Biden, the administration, was trying to change that.
Yeah.
Did that get changed, or did they withdraw that towards the end?
It did not get changed. We won the lawsuit. Attorney General Brenna Byrd joined with 19 or 20 other red states. We sued, and the court said that was not what Title IX was meant for, and that they had overextended their authority, and they struck it down. So it did not happen, thank goodness. And of course, now we have an administration that's rolling all of that back.
Well, and we've been on this battle with you every step of the way. From when I first read Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier, it was I've read a slew of books since then about transgenderism, and I've spoken with Chloe Cole and Laura Becker and two detransitioners that were damaged by this idea that they could become a man and that would solve all their problems. When we were working on the legislation to ban mutilation and cross-sex hormones in minors in Iowa,
right,
I shared the legislation with someone who I know that's a gynecologist or an OB. Mm-hmm. And, they're kind of right in the middle, independent, maybe a little liberal.
Yeah. And
they told me, I don't have any problem with this, except that it should be 25. He said, because as a doctor, you know that the frontal lobe or whatever isn't fully developed.
Not fully developed,
and
correct.
these kids shouldn't be making these decisions. Right. They're going to alter they're going to be on drugs for the rest of their lives. They're going to be harmed in such a way that they can't make an informed decision on that until they're old enough to really have informed consent and understand, what happens to your kidneys and your bones and your, when you have the surgeries, the real surgeries, how drastic that is and how much maintenance that is every day.
Yeah.
Never have an orgasm, all those things. It's terrible.
And it's amazing how many European countries are rolling back from all this stuff. They were some of the first ones to do it. Now, the British Medical Journal a few years ago said that puberty blockers were being administered for gender dysphoria in the context, and I'm quoting, of profound scientific ignorance. That was their quote. A number of one of the European countries that was one of the first to begin to institute all of these things have rolled it back because they did a case study of people into their adulthood, and there was a lot of mental illness and a lot of issues. So that's absolutely true. We chose to settle at 18 because 18 is what's pretty much considered to be an adult, although it's true that the brain hasn't fully developed yet, but that's when people go into the military and all these other issues. So, so it remains that adults can still get these procedures if they want to, just not minors.
A lot of these young women that are plagued by this are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Laura Becker and Chloe Cole are both a little bit on the spectrum. And Chloe, I think she lost her breasts at 16 and Laura at 20. But, 1 hour visit with a doctor, she was prescribed testosterone, and that just rages through a woman's body who's supposed to be making estrogen. Yeah. It's insane.
And again, I would just remind our viewers, that's another reason, again, or the same reason, we're extremely concerned that those protections we put in will get struck down if a lawsuit is filed, because we're the only state trying to basically walk on both sides of the track right now. We've got gender identity as protected class and code, but over here we're protecting women's sports and doing all of these things that probably are going to run contrary to the fact that it's a protected class in the Civil Rights Code. The Des Moines Register wrote an interesting editorial in which they attacked this legislation. I was reading it yesterday, and they said, well, instead of trying to remove gender identity as protected class, you need to withdraw all these laws you've passed. And so let me translate that for the Des Moines Register if they ever decide to look at that. What you're saying is that women's rights don't matter. You're completely okay with erasing women. You're completely okay with biological men who have a bigger heart, who have a much stronger muscular system, who have a much stronger cardiovascular system, tremendous built-in physical advantages to women. You're perfectly okay with biological males going into women's sports and erasing them. That is what the register is saying. They don't care about the rights that are being infringed upon of women, because, hey, what matters more than anything in the world is this small percentage of folks that are transgender, and they should be able to do whatever they want, no matter how it infringes upon other people's rights. That's what the Des Moines Register is saying, and that is why the Des Moines Register is read by almost no one anymore. I find the reporters that I work with in Des Moines extremely fair. The reporters from the Register are extremely fair, but the editorial board hasn't seen the ball since kickoff. And folks should read that editorial, because, again, it just lays bare the fact that they could care less about women being erased, about women's rights. All they care about is the transgender community.
Which is insane. I mean, and I've said that like 3 times, and insanity is one of my favorite words over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
But I knocked thousands of doors in my district, and it's a little bit more blue than a lot of districts. And I talked to Democrats and independents and Republicans, and I know you shared a poll with me that really, really hit this home, but I didn't meet really anybody that thought men should be playing in women's sports, or men should be using their daughters' bathrooms and showers and locker rooms, or anything like that. So this is such a minority, and they show up, they chant, they yell and scream. I was flipped off several times the other day when I was testifying on the drag queen bill. And yet decisions are being made based on this small minority that just has the loudest voice.
That's exactly right. They came up, the Moms for Liberty group was having a rally that had been pre-planned for a long time. They were praying and talking about things they wanted to do to try to protect children. And this group of transgender protesters, or some of them were transgender, maybe not all of them, but they were screaming obscenities and just being really obnoxious, trying to shut down the free speech of others. The fact is, what I've come to believe over the years, and why I've concluded this has to be done, and this is not reflective of the entire transgender community, but the activists in the transgender community have, it's no longer just let me be me. It is let me be me, and you have to agree, or we'll destroy you. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Let me be me, and you have to agree. And they're using the Iowa Civil Rights Code to do that. If you misgender somebody in the workplace, you can get in all kinds of trouble. If an employer is accused of anything that could violate the protected status that transgender folks have in the Iowa Civil Rights Code, they can get into all kinds of trouble. And again, that's because their rights are being elevated above everyone else's. And whereas that's true of all protected classes, in this case, because of the nature of what in the transgender community they want to achieve with their elevated status, like being in women's sports and their locker rooms and their bathrooms, all of these things, they're infringing big time on other people's rights. And that's why this has to be done.
Yes, definitely. I got the call from Senator Westridge when we were moving the Protect the Girls bathrooms K through 12 along last year, I think. And most common sense bill on the planet. But as you've seen, the room is filled with hate-filled activists. And the challenge is, okay, that's like you said, it's like playing whack-a-mole. Okay, so you put a Band-Aid on K through 12, and then I'm talking to young women who are having to leave their college because they're letting a young man use their bathroom, locker room, and shower.
Yeah.
In one particular case, the girl was in the culinary arts program, and she walks in, and there's a 40-year-old man in her changing room.
I talked to the father of this young lady. She had to leave school because of it.
Yep. And the school made them feel like they were the criminals.
Because they're the protected class. Always, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So there was a group of conservative students a few years ago that came to us over their free speech rights being denied at a university here. They won eventually because they sued. But the bottom line was they were told by the administration, sorry, you're not a protected class, and so what you are doing doesn't matter, or what you're concerned about doesn't matter, because the protected class here, that's what we'll get sued for. And so that's the situation. You mentioned colleges. Let me just talk a moment, if I could, about, I just wrote in my notes, shattered dreams, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Yeah. I want to talk about Peyton McNabb. For those viewers who might not know, Peyton was a 17-year-old volleyball player in North Carolina. She was hit by a ball that was spiked by a 5'11" transgender opponent. It hit her in the face, threw her to the ground. She was knocked unconscious. And by the way, it is reported that the transgender player snickered and thought it was funny. Now, obviously, probably didn't know that she was as injured as she turned out to be. Peyton was left with brain damage. She's got paralysis on her right side, and that ended her dreams of getting a volleyball college scholarship, and it's made it difficult for her to walk without falling. Shattered dreams because of the absolute insanity of biological males that decide they're women playing on women's sports teams. It's absolutely insane. Another example, Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines worked her backside off. She became one of the greatest swimmers in collegiate swimming. And who did she have to swim against for the championship? Leah Thomas, who was 6 foot something, and Riley describes she and her other teammates having to shower with this fully intact 6 foot plus male, inches away from him and his anatomy. And then Leah Thomas, who swimming as a male, where he should have been swimming, was lousy. He didn't win anything. But so he goes over to the women's side and is winning, of course, because, as we've talked about, hearts are larger, muscular system's larger, cardiovascular system, everything, all the advantages to the male. But how the testament to how incredible Riley Gaines is as an athlete is that she tied him in the swimming pool. She tied him, but yet guess who they gave the trophy to? They gave it to Leah Thomas, a biological male. Shattered dreams. And the other one I would just mention is Iowa's own Ainsley Erzin. Now, she didn't have to deal with this, but she made some very interesting observations. And for folks who don't know who Ainsley Erzin is, she was a high school track star from Carlisle. She's been an outspoken proponent of removing transgender girls, in other words, biological males, from girls' sports. In an editorial she wrote a few years ago, I'm going to quote her here. She said, this is incredible. She said, "My time of 2:06:52, the time that made me the fastest Iowa school female 800 runner of all time, the time that earned me the title of national champion, was easily beat by 85 high school boys at the 2021 Iowa high school track meet alone." 85, just in our small state of Iowa.
That's insane.
So that's the point people need to understand, is that these are shattered dreams. These are women who have worked their entire life. That is why we created women's sports and men's sports. It is profoundly unfair to have, I don't care if a male decides they're going to identify as a female or not. They can do that if they want to, but they don't get to infringe on other people's rights and play female sports. It's insane. And that, we have moved to protect that in our school system. The law is on the books, but it's going, I fear, going to get struck down as soon as a lawsuit comes down the road, because we've got gender identity as a protected class in code.
Yeah. When I saw that with Riley Gaines, I thought, where are the men on these boards? Where are the men making the decisions that allow, somebody obviously who's a man like Leah Thomas, to compete with these young women, to the audacity to make them change in the same room with them.
And I believe Riley Gaines called them cowards, and that's exactly what they are. They're cowards. Yeah. And as soon as President Trump issued his directive, then they say, we have clear guidance now, we'll go along. They could have had the courage to do this themselves, but they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to do it because they have to bow to the woke mob. That's what it boils down to.
If enough people don't bow to the woke mob, what they have to say doesn't make a difference.
Right.
And that's the problem is this lack of men standing up.
Yep.
I mean, because, you go to the Capitol, it's 90% women showing up down there.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'll be in a room testifying on a piece of legislation, and it's like, where's Waldo when you take a picture, and I'm the only man in the picture.
Yeah.
And there are some other men that come down, but not many.
Yeah, that's true.
It's insane. I'm going to play this for you, and I want your opinion on it and see how this relates to what we're talking about. Maybe. Hold on a second. I turned off my volume here just in case I'd get a text or something. Young men today are more effeminate, more disconnected from masculinity, and more afraid to embrace strength than ever before. The culture has told them to be a strong man is to be toxic. And what happens when men are taught to be weak? Society itself starts to collapse. Look around. Crime is skyrocketing. Families are breaking apart, and fewer men are leading in their homes and their communities. Weakness is being sold as virtue. Passivity is being pushed as wisdom. And what has that given us? A generation of men who don't know who they are, don't know what they stand for, and don't know how to fight for anything. But here's the thing. This cycle also shows us a way forward because hard times create strong men. The men who refuse to stay passive, the men who reclaim their strength, the men who decide to lead again, they are the ones who will rebuild.
Yep.
And then that's kind of what I'm seeing, and I mean, they have there's that saying, what is it? Strong men to create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Yeah. I hear a lot there's probably a social contagion because of all the things that our children are faced with today in social media, the things that they see on TV. I grew up watching John Wayne movies. I grew up watching Gunsmoke in the 60s. Right. Real men doing the right thing, standing up for what is right. That's what John Wayne did. That's what James Arness did as Major Matt Dillon. Mannix, always doing the right thing in the face of whatever the odds were. That was the message at that time on TV and from Hollywood was Americans, strong, masculine men doing the right thing. Not like toxic masculinity, whatever that means, of being, disgusting or disrespecting women. None of that. Just men being men. Bottom line.
Yeah.
That is attacked in our culture constantly today. That's not cool to be a man. You've got it's just unbelievable. Now, some people say it might have to do with chemicals also in some of our foods or something. I don't know about that. I just know that it's shocking to look around today, having grown up as I grew up and served 20 years in the Marine Corps. It reminds me of something that Chesty Puller said. Chesty Puller, most folks probably don't know who that is, but Chesty Puller is considered to be one of the greatest Marines who ever lived. He was on Guadalcanal. He famously, in many, many wars, he was in a chosen reservoir, Korea. He famously, he said he had many, many famous quotes, but one of his quotes was at the chosen reservoir when the Chinese were surrounding the Marine Corps. He said, they're on our left, they're on our right, they're in front of us, they're behind us, they can't get away this time. But later in life, he said he feared our society was becoming so weak that a hardier race was going to come in and take over our country and take our women and children. And that's, I think those words are proving to be pretty prophetic. We're in a bad place today. This is part of the whole gender identity mess is part of it. But
it is. I think we talked about this, but my dad served with Chesty Puller in the Chosen Reservoir.
That's incredible.
And he said that he would march up and down with the men on on their travel train thing or whatever, and that he said he showered with him one time and he had scars all over the place from bullets. He
was an enlisted man's general, and he would make sure the officers had better be at the front of the formation when they went to combat or they were going to catch hell. So he was an incredible individual and emblematic, I think, of the right kind of masculinity that we need in our country that wins wars and keeps us free.
Yeah, we do. And that's one thing, if I could ever tell anybody or any man, is it's time to step up.
Absolutely.
And we can't let Trump do it. It's like, it's great that we have administration that's not pushing this trans agenda, but we have to do that in our communities.
Absolutely.
We have to do it at the state level. We have to do it at the local level, on our school boards, etc., because the tentacles that have gotten into society are so embedded that it's going to take everyone working to eradicate these issues. And it's a small group. One of the things that they've done is they've conflated this trans or gender ideology with the LGB community.
Right.
And a lot of Gays Against Groomers has millions of members.
Yep, on X. Yep.
They're fighting against this, you know, and we don't care if people have a drag show, but kids shouldn't be there.
That's the point.
You know,
kids should not be
nobody's
there.
banning drag shows. If there's drag queens that want to do their thing and there's adults that want to go watch that, that's fine. But when you start bringing kids through the door, toddlers, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, that's not okay.
Yeah, and it's also about whether it's sexualized or not. I can think of one of my favorite movies is White Christmas. Have you ever seen that? Bing Crosby and
No, I haven't.
and Danny Kaye. It's an amazing Christmas movie. But there's a funny scene in that where Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye dress up as sisters and sing this song. It's hilarious, but it's not sexualized at all. And so nobody's trying to ban drag shows, but children should not see that stuff.
No.
We're sexualizing our children, and that's why we said no to pornographic books. That's why we said no to gender queer and all of these books that basically are serving to recruit our young people into the transgender community.
Yep.
That's what they're doing. That's the truth of it. And that's why a lot of gay and lesbian people are opposed to this stuff. I really wish the gay and lesbian community would detach themselves from all of this because it's not the same thing.
You know, the challenge for them is I think that, you know, I have a gay friend who lives in Las Vegas, and I had checked in with him while we were having this battle, and he said him and his husband were dead against all the trans cult is what he called it, and the bringing kids to drag shows and all those things. And I think that, you know, quote unquote normal gay people or people that of that age, they just want to be left alone.
Right.
They want to do their thing. They don't want to go out and chant and recruit and all those things. So it's this really fringe minority, and it really troubles me that if you're against transing kids or if you're against sexualizing kids, somehow they're calling you a homophobe too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some of these hearings, there were parents that brought children that were a year or two old, saying that they identify as the opposite sex. This is insane. It's just, it doesn't make any sense to anybody with a brain that a child that young would have been able in any way, shape, form, or fashion to arrive at that conclusion. That's a parent recruiting their child or wanting them to be that, because it's certainly not coming from the child. It's insane. Some of the things we've seen.
When we were the subcommittee hearing meeting on the not transing minors bill, the prohibition of trans surgeries on minors, a woman brought in her 8-year-old.
Yes.
And made him read from this page.
I was there.
You could barely hear him.
Yep.
And then when he wasn't reading from his page, he had noise canceling headphones on, so he couldn't hear anyone else's testimonies. Right. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's child abuse. And we're standing here watching this woman groom her child to become her son to eventually go down this road of mutilation and cross-sex hormones, and we're standing there and watching it.
That's exactly right. Oliver, if I could share with your viewers, whenever you think it's appropriate, I want to share, because there's so much concern out there. The other side's saying that all of these rights are going to be stripped away from transgender individuals, and there'll be all this discrimination. I think it's important that we set the record straight on that, if I might. So, rights that the transgender community are going to continue to enjoy if this is removed from the Iowa Civil Rights Code. First of all, let's remember, transgender individuals are American citizens. They have the protection of the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is restricting government, not people. Same thing with the Iowa Constitution. They have those protections. They're going to continue to have the freedom to present to others as a gender of their choice, the freedom to dress as they choose, the freedom as an adult to have body-altering surgeries if they choose to have those, the freedom to grow and style out their hair and beard, whatever, regardless of their sex, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly and protest, right to petition the government, right to keep and bear arms, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, right to due process, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, right to property, right to vote, right not to be enslaved, protection from bullying in school, protection from assault and other criminal or torturous behavior, and all the other things that are guaranteed in constitutional and statutory law. Here's what they won't have if we remove gender identity as a protected class. And all of these things, I think, would fit into the category of infringing on other people's rights. They would not have the ability to use public restrooms, dressing rooms, and showers designated for the opposite sex. They would not have the ability, and this is happening right now, prison cells, homeless shelters, hotel rooms, and other spaces designated for the opposite sex. Right now, we have individuals in shelters and incarcerated in our corrections department that have decided they identify as females, and they are being housed with female inmates. There's a federal case right now in which a federal female prisoner has filed a major lawsuit because she says for years she has been subjected to having to be in female prisons with biological males who've decided they're female. She's having to shower with them. She's having to do all these things that make her feel incredibly uncomfortable. That would not be allowed. The right to free genital mutilation surgeries paid for by taxpayers will no longer be allowed. And that's what's happening right now for Medicaid patients, incarcerated individuals in the state of Iowa. The right to file legal complaints against a business that believes sex is binary and acts accordingly. They wouldn't be able to do that anymore. The ability to file legal complaints against an employer who doesn't affirm the validity of an individual's self-proclaimed gender identity. They would not be able to do that anymore. So every one of these things that when we remove gender identity as protected class from code, all of the real rights and liberties and protections remain. But where this has resulted in infringing on other people's liberties and freedoms and security and safety and privacy, that's what's going to change.
And that makes perfect sense. Common sense.
Yep.
Yeah. How do we affect in Iowa? I don't know if there's a way to do it, but I spoke with a psychiatrist that said he was kind of a unicorn when it came to how he handled patients that came in and self-identified as a different gender. You know, he actually worked with them on their depression, anxiety, underlying causes, where most or a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, even in Iowa, are just affirming their self-identified diagnosis that they got from TikTok or school or their whatever group, and just pushing them along this path. How can we, and I think it's the American Psychology Association or whatever has signed on to that.
Psychiatric Association.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that was part of when I did all my studies, when I was moving the bill to ensure that our bathroom and changing facility use was based on biology at birth. And when I was moving the legislation to prohibit the surgeries for our minors, I did a lot of research on these things. I don't know that government can solve that particular issue. We were talking earlier about courage and about doing the right thing and standing up for what is right. I think doctors and folks in these professions are going to have the courage to stand up and say this has to stop. As well as the medical associations who have hook, line, and sinker bought into what I think is perpetuating things that are not true to the American people and to our young people.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of that, and you talked about Europe. Yeah. They've rolled all this back, and they're saying, okay, this isn't good for kids. This isn't what we're going to do, and they're doing that medically.
Yep.
We have a capitalist medical system, and they make a lot of money on this stuff.
Yep, they do.
I mean, I was talking to a guy whose friend was a surgeon that said he could make so much more money doing one of these surgeries than, removing burn scars from somebody's arm. And
it was incredible when we held hearings before we moved the legislation to prohibit minors from being able to have these procedures. We held hearings, and it was amazing. The doctors came in that had been doing these procedures. They weren't keeping any kind of records as to what happens to these young people as they move into adulthood. They had nothing. And when we asked them about what's the procedure called when a child or a person decides to reverse those procedures.
The detransition.
Yeah, the detransition. They claimed they knew nothing about detransition. They knew nothing about it. So it was amazing to listen. And there's a lot of money being made. Let's face it. There's a lot of money being made, and that's definitely contributing to a lot of this issue. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, how crazy is it going to be over these next few weeks? Have you gotten threats?
Well, anytime we run, legislation for which there's a lot of intense feelings about, we get unfriendly and unkind emails. So yes, I have gotten some unfriendly and unkind emails. There are some that I have turned over to the Department of Public Safety for review. It could get very, very intense, but this is what we get paid to do. We raised our hand and we took an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and I think along with that, manifested in that is taking an oath to stand for truth, and that's what we're doing. We're standing for truth. We're standing for what we believe has to be done to safeguard the protections we put in place for our young women and for our society, and we're trying to take a stand to say we don't want Iowa taxpayers paying for these gender procedures to the tune of over $1 million since 2015. We're hoping that will stop also when we take this out of code and maybe pass legislation that says we're not going to pay for this, and hopefully that'll stand up to court muster.
Yeah, definitely. And I always feel like truth is compassion.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm glad you said that. I've said that many times on the floor. Compassion is truth. I mean, when you lie, there's nothing compassionate about that. And again, I think it's very telling. I will continue to say this. 27 other states do not have any kind of protections like these in their code, nor does the federal government, because they're not really needed. And they're being used in a way that produces very negative consequences and infringes on the rights of others. And that's why we need to remove them. It's not going to, and by the way, I haven't mentioned this, but the Bostock Supreme Court decision on the federal level means that there are protections for transgender individuals against housing and employment discrimination. That exists already in federal code. So I also hear people yelling, and now transgender individuals can be discriminated against for housing and employment. Bostock on the federal level ensures that that's not the case.
So you've really brought it home, how they won't be negatively effective, and how now our women's rights will be protected, children will be protected. And it's logically, you can have that argument, but the people that are against this are not logical in how they try to present things.
Right. And let me say, protecting men too. I just talked to a male who walked into his restroom and there were females, biological females in there, but they were, I guess, identifying as males, but they looked totally like females, and he was trying to turn his eyes away, and he didn't want to get accused of something, in the restroom. So I think the protections are for both male and female, although predominantly for female. Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. But
you're absolutely right. They do not look at, from my perspective anyway, from my biblical worldview, they do not look at things from a logical viewpoint, nor do they look at things in truth. Look, we've got people trying to tell us today that men can breastfeed. Okay, right. This is the most ridiculous thing. Why are people even entertaining this incredible nonsense? This is coming out of the transgender community.
Gosh, I saw somewhere that,
or that
I
men
don't know
can
if
have
it was
babies.
UK, where they were given this trans person all these hormones to try to get them so they could lactate and so they could breastfeed. I can't imagine the chemicals in that and how bad it would be.
And apparently you can buy this thing where you can
like a prosthetic.
Yeah, but or that men can have babies.
Right.
All this,
men have periods.
But it's just no matter how much you change your clothing, no matter how many hormones you take, no matter how many surgical procedures you have, men are still men and women are still women.
Yeah.
And no matter how much of that is done, that's just the truth. And we have to stand up for the truth, because this is extremely damaging to our culture and to our civilization.
They need to have informed consent.
Yeah.
I read this book, Lost in Transnation, by Miriam Grossman, who's worked with over 500 families, some transgender and individuals. And there's young guys that have had that complete surgery that are completely lost and regretful.
Yeah.
The brutality of it, the amount of maintenance, the reality. They have this false idea that, I'm going to become a woman and all my problems will be solved and everything's going to be great. Then they go through that and they're mutilated for life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a lie. Like you said, no amount of surgery, no amount of mutilation, no amount of lifelong cross-sex hormones can change somebody from a man to a woman or a woman to a man. And
let me tell you this too, Oliver. People are saying, why are you worried about this? Because there's so few people in our society. Why is this a big deal? Well, that's true that it's a small percentage of our society, but it's growing exponentially. Let me give you this data. there were 138 claims in 2015 for Medicaid payments for gender care for Medicaid patients and incarcerated individuals. 138 claims in 2015, 2,796 in 2022.
Jeez.
Yep. And then the actual unique number of individuals, in other words, a lot of those people were having more than one claim. So if you look at just unique individuals, it's gone from 37 in 2015 to 612 in 2022. So this social contagion, if you want to call it that, is continuing. More and more children and perhaps some adults are getting swept up into this. So it is an increasing problem, which is why I believe, again, as this encroaches more and more on the civil liberties and rights of others, we have to take a stand on this. We absolutely have to, because it is a problem. People want to say that it isn't, but it absolutely is. And let me tell you, when I was running the legislation to restrict changing facility use, locker rooms, and bathrooms to biology at birth, you would not believe the number of parents that reached out and contacted us and said, our daughter won't even use the locker room or the restrooms at school anymore because they're afraid there's this biological male that's decided they're a female that's going to be in there. And it is a real problem in Iowa. People don't want to believe it is, but it is.
It is. And I appreciate everything that you've been working on, and we've been working on together for this too. Why has it taken so long? I remember we brought 30 nurses to the Capitol to testify that they were losing their jobs over the COVID shots. And I was standing in the hallway with Senator Whitfer, and it didn't seem like at that time, that was, 4 years ago, that there was a big push to write. He was really talking about just putting Band-Aids on everything over the next few years. Why has it taken so long to get to this point to where we can actually remove the cause of these problems? I
think part of it is, Oliver, nobody wants to be in a position where we're removing a class of people from the from the Civil Rights Code. That's a very difficult thing to do because we know what's coming. We know the accusations that are going to be made, and we know the feelings of a lot of people that actually buy into and believe that now they're going to be discriminated against and targeted and all of these things. So we were, as I said earlier, we were trying to cut the tentacles off the octopus, so to speak, to try to handle it that way. And as we looked more and more at it, as I looked more and more at it as chair of judiciary, I concluded it's just it's a dynamite waiting to go off, because as soon as we get sued, as long as it remains protected class and code, everything we've done is put at risk. And so finally, the decision that I came to after a number of years resisting this and trying to say, well, we'll protect women's sports, and we'll protect their changing facilities, we'll protect their locker rooms, we'll ban these gender reassignment surgeries. And then I began to have legal scholars start talking to me and saying, these two things can't cohabitate because they're coming into conflict with one another. That's when I realized that we have to do it, no matter how difficult it's going to be, and no matter the gnashing of teeth and screaming and hollering and the accusations. We just believe it has to be done, and it's the right thing to do.
It is the right thing to do, and I blame a lot of that on media. I mean, it's especially the Des Moines Register. I mean, during the time that, the parental rights bill was going through and all the separate pieces of it were going through the House, I had posted something, and somebody had said something about all the discrimination, or no, I had seen a post from somebody I went to school with, and it was about all the discriminatory things that the Republican Party was doing against the gay community. Mm-hmm. And I private messaged him, and he had a list from one of these organizations, and each bill had a little paragraph saying how discriminatory this was. Mm-hmm. I sent him the actual legislation, and I said, no, that's not what the legislation says. Like the transparency one, for instance. Mm-hmm. No, it just basically says that if your child wants to identify as a different gender or use different pronouns at schools, that they have to let the parents
tell the parents, yeah.
And we heard all about that. But he was kind of shocked that what they were saying wasn't true, and what the register was saying wasn't true about the real details of the legislation.
Right. And it's unfortunate. The mainstream media always uses the language of the left. They always do. On the abortion issue, they use the language and arguments of the left, and then you have to always counter-argue it in the news articles. That's how they always do it. They always, same thing with this discussion right here, they keep publishing headlines such as, Republicans continue to target transgender. That's simply not true. We have been targeting the protection of women and their rights when it came to sports, changing facilities, all of these issues. We've been trying to protect young people from these irreversible procedures on them when they don't have the age and maturity to make those decisions that are lifelong. But the headlines always, that we're targeting transgender individuals, or that we're trying to deny women's rights and all these sorts of things. So it's been that way since as long as I've been in the legislature. It's always a heartbeat bill. When we're doing they always talk about book bans when we're, it's not about book bans. It's about what is age appropriate in school. There's no books being banned. You can go to Amazon and get the book. You can go to your public library and check out the book. We haven't touched public libraries because they're public libraries. People can go there and check out what they want. Right. It was schools and what is age appropriate, and Gender Queer and Flamer and some of these other pornographic books, they're not age appropriate, period. No. And if the schools had the courage, we talked about courage a few minutes ago, if they had the courage to take care of these things, we wouldn't have had to enact legislation. But they wouldn't do it. They ignored parents. They had police escort them off of the school campuses. They would shut down their right to speak. That's why we ended up passing that legislation, and that's why now schools are in the position they're in, because they wouldn't do the right thing. Well,
and it wasn't just the big schools either. I mean, even little town of Van Meter, you had Second Step, SEL coming in, DEI instructor with their pronouns on their name tag, books coming through in elementary that were promoting gender ideology. Yep. And when parents spoke up, they got squashed. Yep. I mean, the school board, there was one real conservative on the board that fought for parents. He finally, after 20 or however many years he was on it, he finally resigned. But, these Republicans, they're supposed to be Republicans on the school board. They walk into the school and it's like all of a sudden they're in a woke bubble, and they changed their minds about what's right and wrong and who they need to stand up for.
Well, my assessment of school boards is, number one, they're run by their superintendents, which is supposed to be the other way around, and they're run by their attorneys. Yep. They're scared to death to do anything unless the attorney tells them it's okay. Yeah. So we're living in such a litigious society today that nobody wants to do anything unless their attorney tells them it's okay. And I just keep going back to, you do the right thing and you let the chips fall where they may. That's what you've got to do. That's what courageous leadership is. But my impression of most of the school boards is that whatever the superintendent tells them to do and whatever the attorney tells them they're allowed to do, that's what they do.
Yeah,
so
and
it's unfortunate.
It's really easy to see that after you've been to a few meetings and say anything that's against what their superintendent is working on, or what the kind of the woke mob is working on. Yep. But is it going to pass?
Well, that's a good question that I cannot answer. I believe they're strong. I believe that it is a caucus priority. I just wasn't operating in a vacuum, okay? There's been a lot of discussion about this over a period of years. I believe it is a caucus priority. Now, when I say caucus priority, we have 66. Unfortunately, we lost Martin Graber, a great man, a great, great man. We will miss him dearly. So now we have 66. So a caucus priority would be more than 33. I mean, if you have more than a majority, it's a caucus priority. That doesn't mean we have 51. So that will play out in the coming weeks. We will see if we do or not. I think there's also great interest in the Senate. And so I think folks should just watch the news over the course of the next few days. I think they're going to start getting a really good idea of the direction things are going to go.
And will it be a type of vote that we can see who voted for and against it?
Well, most certainly if it comes to the floor, you will be able to. Those are public votes. Yeah. If we don't have 51, and a lot of citizens always ask me, why can't you tell us who's against it? Because number one, I don't always know. When I present a bill to my caucus, Republicans in the room don't tell me whether they support it or not. They can if they want to, but normally if people are opposed to it, they will go back and tell the leadership privately. And so I don't know who's opposed. I know who supports, but I don't necessarily know who opposes it. And frankly, those caucuses have to, by nature, be confidential. We can't go in there and have these sometimes knockdown, drag out fights amongst family. That happens. We're not the Borg from Star Trek. We don't don't all agree on everything. So we'll have some intense conversations, and it is absolutely profoundly wrong for me or any other legislator to go out and talk about confidential conversations in the caucus, because then we lose all trust with one another and we get nothing done. So as much as I know citizens would like to know who is opposed to it, that's just going to have to be up to the citizens of that district asking their legislator, where do you stand on this? Austin Harris has come out publicly, Representative Austin Harris. He's a friend of mine. I do not agree with him on this at all, but he has come out adamantly opposed to the legislation. He's the only one publicly, as far as I know, that's come out opposed to it. But citizens are just going to have to ask their legislators, where do you stand on this issue, and then push them in the direction that they want them to go. So.
Well, let me ask you this. Why is it that every Democrat votes against these bills, whether it's protecting girls' sports, protecting girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers, or protecting minors from mutilation and cross-sex hormones? Why do every Democrat votes against those protections?
We were talking about that earlier. It is inexplicable to me that the party that once fought for women's rights and fought to establish Title IX and called themselves feminists and fought for so many rights for women are now willing to allow biological males to identify as female and erase them in their sports, say that their feelings and their sense of security doesn't matter in their changing facilities, in their restrooms, that it's okay that they have to stand and shower inches away from a fully intact male because that male's decided they're female. I do not, and I can only call it the woke mind virus because I don't know what else to call it. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that's exactly what you'll see happen if it comes to the floor. I would predict that every Democrat will vote against it. And I would say to people, be very careful when you're thinking about who you want to vote for governor, because the fact of the matter is that a Democrat that becomes governor will more than likely, regardless of who it is, Rob Sand or anybody else, is going to have the woke mind virus, and they will act accordingly. That's just how it is. There is a profound difference between Republican and Democrat in 2025. There's no doubt about it.
And that's going to be the demise of their party, because in decades, we didn't have as many Democrats vote for a Republican president as we did this last round.
Right.
We didn't have as many independents that stepped up and voted Republican. Mm-hmm. And I think that these issues are some of the issues, besides not being able to buy groceries, that push Democrats further and further away from the far left, because I would have ultimate respect for a Democrat legislator that voted for some of this stuff, protections for kids.
Yeah.
And I know I think there's probably several that would, if they didn't think they'd get ousted. Does that make sense?
The pressure is intense. If a Democrat were to vote for this bill, they would have a primary opponent, and there would be such an intense backlash against them, because the truth of the matter is that the people that support them has really narrowed to the radical fringe. I hate to say it like that, but that's where I believe they are today. The radical fringe is who supports Democrats. And since the election, they've doubled down on stupid. We were talking about John Wayne a few minutes ago.
Right.
John Wayne famously said, life is tough, it's tougher if you're stupid, right? And you can't fix stupid. But here they're doubling down on stupid since they lost the presidential election in a big way, and Republicans took the House and Republicans took the Senate, albeit by narrow margins. They took them. So now you've got Democrats doubling down on illegal immigration and saying we're not going to support Trump as he tries to remove dangerous criminals from our communities. And they're doubling down on the transgender issue. You've got another governor, I don't remember what state it was, but just came out, maybe it was Maine, I'm not sure, but they just came out and said nope, or it wasn't Maine. There was a Democrat governor that just came out and said that he thought that, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back again. It was I believe it was the person that runs the schools in a state, because I want to get this right for the viewers, came out and said that he did not believe it was correct for Trump to say there were just two genders. So they are doubling down on stupid, and they will double down on stupid in Iowa in the coming weeks. If we're able to pass this bill, people will see it. All you got to do is look at the vote count, and you'll see it.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. I'll be praying that this bill passes so that we can, finalize the protections for our women and our young children here in Iowa. And I tell you what, you've got my ultimate appreciation for what you're doing. I deeply respect you for bringing this forward and standing on the front lines to protect Iowans.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So thanks so much. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah.
I think we're at the hour mark. And,
absolutely.
Anytime, hopefully
it's great to be here.
We can do it again here.
It was
soon.
great to be here in person. That's fantastic. Never done that before, so it was a lot of fun.
For sure. Yeah. So God bless you, Representative Holt.
Thank you so much.
Where can people find you? I know you have you have a podcast as well that you sometimes do, the Freedom Watch, right?
Yes, I do Freedom Watch. Not nearly as regularly as you do. I do it when I have the time to do it. When I think there's something really pertinent I need to say. But you can go to my Facebook page, Steve Holt, Iowa House of Representatives Facebook. That's where I post just about everything. And then also you can email me at my legislative address, which is stephen.holt@legis.iowa.gov. And I would also ask your viewers to just pray for everyone, pray for safety and calm heads up there from all sides. We want everyone to be safe.
That's what we need, just a shroud of protection over everyone at the Capitol.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time. God bless you.
Yep.